Although this car looks an awful lot like the Polestar 2, this is actually the Polestar 4, the brand's fourth vehicle and third dedicated electric vehicle. We have the Polestar 2, which is a compact or subcompact sedan, depending on how you want to categorize it. The Polestar 3 is going to be on sale later this calendar year. It's a mid-size crossover, so think Porsche Cayenne electrified. Now we have the Polestar 4, which they're calling an electric coupe crossover, but it's not a squished Polestar 3. And that is perhaps the biggest surprise with the Polestar 4. At this point in time, we don't have a lot of details on the new Sustainable Experience Architecture, or C platform, that this vehicle is going to be riding on. I wouldn't be surprised if we found it in the future under the skin of a Volvo or some of the related companies that Geely also owns. Remember that Polestar is co-owned by Volvo and Geely, and Volvo, although they are a publicly traded corporation on the Stockholm Stock Exchange, is majority owned by Geely still. The relationship between these companies is all very, very convoluted. It's probably not too important, to be honest. The big thing you should know is that the development of vehicles is somewhat synergized between Volvo and Polestar. So what we see in the Polestar 4 and the Polestar 3 is definitely very Volvo-like from an active safety perspective, also from the infotainment, user controls, things like that. But this Polestar 4 is, again, not riding on the same platform as Polestar 3. And here's why I find that interesting. This is going to use a unique battery pack. It's not going to use the new 111 kilowatt hour pack that we find in the Polestar 3. According to the spec sheets that they've given us so far, it's instead going to be using a slightly smaller battery pack, 102 kilowatt hours. And that's going to be on both long-range versions that are coming initially. There may be shorter range versions in the future, but all they've given us are details on the long-range versions. Now, you're going to get your choice of two different power levels, either a single motor in the rear that will produce 272 horsepower, 253 pound-feet of torque, and they're targeting about 300 miles of EPA range, so pretty similar to what we find in the Polestar 3 with the smaller battery pack there. Or you can get the dual motor version that's going to give you 544 horsepower and a whole heap load of torque as well. They're saying that one is going to go 0 to 60 in 3.8 seconds. Obviously, there are going to be faster models in the future. That's something that we've seen from Polestar. They'll release a model and then they'll produce performance packages after performance packages. But because this is not riding on the same platform as Polestar 3, it's not going to have the air suspension that we find on Polestar 3. Instead, it's going to be more of a conventional semi-active damping system, they say, so more of a regular steel spring setup. And that makes sense because this is going to be less expensive than the Polestar 3 as well. They're saying that the initial launch pricing is going to be around $60,000. What's going to be on that $60,000 model, we just don't know because we aren't going to get North American details until 2024. I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't on sale in North America until late 2024, perhaps even 2025. Again, details are still coming in on some of this. However, as we've seen with Polestar in the past, it's probably going to be a relatively well-equipped model starting at around $60,000, and then there will be less expensive models coming a little bit later. And that does make sense when you look at the size of this and the way that it's positioned in the lineup. Even though they're calling this a coupe SUV, this is actually about the same size in terms of the roof height, in terms of the length and width, etc., as a BMW 5 Series. And very interestingly, not far off a Tesla Model S either, because the Model S really is a mid-size electric sedan. It's not a full-size sedan. It is actually quite a bit smaller than, say, Mercedes-Benz S-Class or BMW 7 Series. This Polestar 4 is going to be a little bit smaller than the Tesla Model S, but not a great deal smaller. And on the inside, it looks to be similarly sized, although again, not too many details. But let's roll through some of the other things that we do know. To give you a better idea of the size of the Polestar 4, these are 22-inch wheels. You can see that they've really gone for a very raked look, a very low front end, very pointy front end design, big wheels pushed all the way out to the corners. It has a pretty wide track and very little faux grille going on up front. We just have the small air intakes down there at the bottom of the grille, some of the active safety sensors in between, and then this new split headlight design that we're going to see in some upcoming Polestars. This was really started with the Precept concept, and it's something that we're going to see also in the Polestar 5 and of course the Polestar 6. The Polestar 5 is a flagship sedan. The Polestar 6 is going to be a luxury EV roadster. Out back, we have a modification of the Polestar signature lighting design with that strong light bar that runs across the back, but now it just points down rather than wrapping back around. The other thing you'll notice if you really look closely is that there's no rear window back here. This may or may not make it to the United States, but in Europe it looks like there's not going to be a rear window. Instead, we have a rear view camera setup like we find in a wide variety of vehicles, and just a plain old sheet metal partition back there. The lack of a rear window likely reduces weight just a hair. It also probably reduces manufacturing costs, and it gives it kind of a sleek look. But from some angles, the more you stare at it, the more you realize, hey, there is something missing. And that something missing is, of course, going to be the glass. It's probably less noticeable in the darker colors, but if you got a white one, it would look just unusual at first glance. Now, on the inside, they haven't given us too many details and too many pictures to go by. But we do have the largest screen that they've ever put in a vehicle. It's just over 15 inches, so about 1 inch larger than the Polestar 3. The dashboard design is similar to the Polestar 3, but also, I think, similar to some current Tesla models. It has a very horizontal theme, very clean, very modern look there. It looks like there is just one large air vent in the middle of the dashboard for that area, and then vents on either side, but it's positioned right there underneath that center stack screen, which I am not the biggest fan of. I do think that's kind of an unusual look right there. Below that, we do find a storage area. Looks like we find cup holders down there, the play and pause button for the system, for the infotainment system. We also have basically the same steering wheel and turn signal controls, etc., that we find in the Polestar 3 and the upcoming Volvo EX90. So the shifter is up there on the steering wheel column. We have touch buttons on the front of the steering wheel. The seats, however, they are quite different. This does not look like it's going to get the really fancy seats that we find in the Polestar 3, which feature massage, extending thigh cushion, things like that. These look to be a slightly more basic design. Fixed headrests, it looks like fixed shoulder belts here, no extending thigh cushion, possibly not seat massage. Again, a lot of details still left to come. And unfortunately, those details include things like, does it have a front trunk? What's the legroom like? What's the headroom like, etc. We do know that it has a big panoramic glass roof that is fixed in place, but it is electrochromatic, so it's basically a big LCD, and it can become translucent or opaque at the touch of a button. That's a really handy touch there. We also know that there's going to be a lot of environmental transparency with the Polestar 4. That's something that the brand has been doing for a while, and they're really ratcheting things up. So this model, it says, is going to have supply chain transparency, blockchain-like traceability for risk materials in the batteries, full life cycle assessment showing the true carbon footprint of the car that will be published alongside the Polestar 4 Sustainability Declaration in 2024. We're also going to get new materials on the inside, a tailored knit textile fabric, which consists of 100% recycled PET along with bioattributed microtech vinyl, that is quite a mouthful there, and animal welfare sourced Nappa leather upholsteries. The Nappa leather is a twist. Volvo has been doing this, and so has Polestar. They say that leather, in some instances, especially if you're buying beef and beef cattle are being slaughtered anyway, actually has a lower environmental footprint than some of the recycled materials that the competition is using or that they are even using in their own vehicles. So they offer that option if you're interested in. There's also a knit fabric, as I said before, made of 100% recycled polyester. I'm surprised that there is no wool fabric going on in here like we find in the Polestar 3. Going back to the drivetrain for just a moment, both motors are going to be permanent magnet motors, but up front we get a front axle disconnect feature, very much like we find in the Hyundai and Genesis eGMP platform vehicles. This allows the vehicle to mechanically disconnect the differential and the motor from the equation in order to help improve rolling efficiency. Now, the rear motor is not detachable. It's always going to be driving the vehicle forward, so when in two-wheel drive operation for efficiency, it's going to be a rear-wheel drive powered model. The battery pack appears to be a 400-volt nominal pack, probably the same sort of architecture we find in the EX90 and the Polestar 3. That's logical because you don't actually need an 800-volt architecture in order to charge rapidly. This is going to support 200 kilowatt DC fast charging. We don't have any detail on the charge curve, but if they held that charge curve for long enough, it could charge as rapidly as a modern Tesla. Remember that modern Teslas don't have 800-volt architectures, but they cook along at 255 kilowatts just fine. You don't actually need 800 volts to charge at 250 kW. It can help here and there, but it actually isn't required. So I'm not bothered. We also are going to get a 22 kilowatt AC level 2 charger on board, but that's probably going to be a 3-phase unit. So by the time this makes it to the US, expect that to be derated. I wouldn't be surprised if we got, say, a 20 kilowatt unit here, however, because 19 and 20 kilowatt onboard chargers are definitely becoming more popular. It's also going to offer vehicle to load, vehicle to grid functionality, bidirectional charging, etc., and a heat pump is going to be standard in all models. On the software front, you'll notice that the screen is now horizontal in orientation rather than vertical in orientation like the other Polestar vehicles. I don't mind either direction. I think this is going to make the dashboard appear a little bit wider, which could be attractive on the inside. It's going to be running essentially the same software, and it's going to offer Apple CarPlay integration as well. There are going to be 2 different audio systems, 12 speakers and 16 speakers, 1,400 watts of power on that system. And like the other Polestar vehicles, it's going to offer complete over-the-air update functionality. Let me know what you think about this design down there in the comments section. This is probably the most differentiated vehicle from the Volvo lineup in terms of its design. There's really no Volvo going on the outside of the vehicle, and on the inside, the relationship is very, very minor. The stalks on the steering column are similar, the touch buttons on the wheel are similar, but the wheel itself is not. The buttons on the windows, things like that, those are likely going to be shared, but exactly how much more is shared will remain to be seen because there is no Volvo corollary to this vehicle just yet. Now, we don't know whether some of those EX90 and Polestar 3 safety systems are going to make their way onto this vehicle. They did not comment about future LiDAR inclusion or things like that, but we are going to have an available heads-up display, tons of airbags, the latest active safety software outside of the LiDAR unit. And we know that this is going to launch in production in 2023 for Europe and for China. It is going to be built in China, at least for the moment. Although, depending on exactly how this platform is related to EX90, production could move to the United States. That's something that Polestar has said that they're interested in. And the relationship with Volvo gives them the flexibility to build most of their vehicles in Volvo factories as a contract job as well. And that's exactly why we're going to see Polestar 3 moving to the United States. Let me know what you think about all that down there in the comments section below, and let me know what you think about Polestar as a brand as well. I know there's been a lot of debate about the Chinese ownership of Volvo and Polestar, but at the moment, this has been really more of an advantage to the American market than anything, because if this was some other car company that was just a Chinese company, they would be building everything in China and simply shipping them to the US, and that is not the long-term goal at Polestar. Polestar's long-term goal appears to be North American production for North American markets. The amount of cash coming out of China has also been a big advantage as far as the rapidness of the design and manufacturing for these vehicles. If this was a relatively small boutique company, they wouldn't be pushing this many models out this quickly. When you take a look, for instance, at Tesla as a startup or Rivian as a startup, they have produced 4 models in record timing, and that's because of that relationship to Volvo. And of course, with Polestar, that Volvo relationship, again, is very awkward. You can do your own Googling on this. Polestar is half owned by Volvo, half owned by Geely. Volvo is approximately half or so owned by Geely as well. So Polestar is more Geely than Volvo, but also still some Volvo in the equation. And it is definitely very Scandinavian in terms of the design of the vehicle, but a different kind of Scandinavian than we find in the modern Volvo lineup. And this has allowed Volvo to focus maybe more on their traditional core values of luxury, a warm feeling, more family-oriented vehicle, etc. And Polestar is looking at Swedish performance, I guess you could say, as far as the style of the vehicle goes. Let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section below. And are you going to be pre-ordering a Polestar 4? Or are you going to be waiting for the Polestar 5? And does the 1 through 6 nomenclature at Polestar, where they are not related to the size and they're simply related to when the vehicle was announced, does that bug you? I do think it is a little unusual that Polestar 1 was this big expensive vehicle, Polestar 2 is the affordable vehicle, Polestar 3 is the bigger expensive thing, and this is now less expensive, and then 6 is going to be more expensive, and, you know, on and on and on. Anyway, let me know what you think about all that, and I'll see all of you next week.